I used to have a boyfriend called Jonah, and one time we were on a day trip to the fun fair. We used to try and go to the fun fair whenever it was in town, because even though it was a hassle to get to, there was something about the culture of it that we both found kind of ridiculous. Jonah described it once as a theme park for the 1950s, and although I thought that was pretty accurate at the time, I later thought it was more like a theme park for how people wanted the 1950s to have been. That was pretty recently, and because Jonah and I have broken up now, I couldn't tell him about my little update. I considered texting it to him, but then I thought that'd be weird. For some reason, I don't want him to know that I've been thinking about it. There used to be a coconut shy at the fun fair, with a huge facade in the shape of a whale's open mouth. The top of the stall was the whale's top lip, teeth hanging over a few inches. Massive cardboard mouth all the way around, bottom teeth sticking up from the ground. The shy was in the middle, where the tonsils would usually be, and the whole stall was sort of whale-themed. If you managed to knock all the coconuts off, which I never did, you won a huge stuffed whale which hovered happily above the coconuts, grinning out at potential owners. Over time, Jonah and I became more and more fixated on that whale, because every time we went, it was still there, or at least we thought it was the same one because it looked identical. Each time we went, Jonah became more and more determined to throw the ball through the mouth of the whale, knock down all the coconuts, and win that top prize. Every time he went, he came closer and closer to doing it, until eventually, on what was probably his 10th attempt, he did. The whale was finally Jonah's, or so we thought, until the guy who ran the stall told us that he couldn't give it to us. But isn't the whale the top prize? No, it's just for show. Top prize is goldfish. Surely he knew what he was doing, Jonah said to me on the way out. Yeah, it's such a con. They make it look like it's the top prize to try and get people to play, but clearly they don't expect anyone to ever win. Maybe it's rigged. Or maybe I'm just that good at the coconut shy, Jonah said. And when he did, a light flickered on behind his eyes, and in the next second, as the fun fair closed around us, he dashed off without saying a word. I waited around for him for ages, sitting there outside the fun fair, but then I heard a noise coming from the other side of the park. Someone was yelling at the top of their voice, so I poked my head around the corner to see what was going on. The voice was coming from inside the coconut shy, and as I got closer, I realized that, of course, the person who was shouting was Jonah. Furious at being denied the whale toy, he had waited until the guy who ran his stall had turned his back, jumped over into the stool and tried to steal it. Sadly for Jonah, the guy had turned his back to close the stool for the evening. So when Jonah turned around from trying to wrestle the whale from its pedestal, he had found himself imprisoned inside the larger whale's mouth. Basically, Jonah was trapped inside the whale. It was such a funny moment. One of those that you always remember, where all the pieces fall into place at the same time and you just sit back and think, yes, this makes sense. Isn't my life so much fun? I was always fascinated by the fact that the animals go into Noah's Ark in pairs. I mean, God knows too is all anybody really needs of anything. As long as there's a male and a female and a sufficient level of privacy on the Ark, then life as we know it can be rebuilt. No one knows it'll take time, but to be honest, he's probably pretty chuffed that God chose him to be the lone survivor. Given the choice of having to rebuild society or drowning alongside the sinners, I know what I'd choose. My first question would be, what's an ark again? At which point God would probably just give up and look for his guy somewhere else. Probably the Docklands, where he'd surely have better luck. But the pairs, that's the real kicker in the story for me. I mean, it's not like we're the only organism who needs somebody else to procreate, but it would solve a lot of life's problems if we could just do it by ourselves. It would do away with so much trouble. If you wanted a child, you could just grow one out of your arm or something, like a starfish. No negotiation, no compromise, just a child when you want one. Sometimes I think the whole message of Noah's Ark is that at the most basic level, we need to be in pairs to survive. We're useless if we're on our own. There has to be two of us, but that can't be true, can it? Because some people go throughout their whole lives on their own and still have found a way to lead a meaningful existence. And then there are couples who can't procreate together, whether because they're gay or one of them is infertile or something, but that doesn't make their lives any less meaningful than any other kind of pair. It tells you something about God, really, doesn't it? I mean, what if the pair of lions had a baby, but a horrible, abusive parent? The ark needs at least one pair of gay or infertile lions to adopt it and give it a happy home. That's beside the point, though. Or is it? Because Noah's Ark tells us something that I think is fundamentally untrue, that the world goes round on stable pairs of heterosexuals. Not only that, but I can't even imagine what it must have been like to be the gazelle or something, and get the message from God being like, you're the gazelle that I want, get yourself over to that ark, and think you were finally free of your boring gazelle husband, only to find out that he's going to be coming along as well. Suddenly that poor gazelle went from what felt like a new start to basically having to go on a cruise holiday. Also, as far as I'm aware, animals don't get into long-term relationships like humans do, no less get married. So imagine the horror if that gazelle ended up with a gazelle that she'd never met before. Or even worse, a gazelle that she'd fucked a few years before just for a bit of fun, who she then gets cosmically paired to for the rest of her life. I don't even know what it is. There's just something about the whole pairs thing that rubs me up the wrong way. It doesn't seem right, for some reason, that we feel the need to pair up like this. I just don't understand it at all. But everyone else seems to. One makes sense, sure, just you being you. And even with 3, there's a bit of interplay. But with 2, it's just, all you're getting is one other person. And surely there comes a time, as there always comes a time, when you know everything there is to know about that person. And all your conversations are just repetition and elaboration on what's happened to you over the last few days. You'd never get bored with 10 people. Ever. For so many reasons you would never get bored. There's something wrong with you, is what Jonah said when I told him about it. People are meant to be together. It'd be boring if we could do everything by ourselves. Should have been a warning to him, frankly, because he was my boyfriend. We were literally a pair at the time. And when I told him that I didn't understand them, he just couldn't put 2 and 2 together. It was such a red flag that only a man who got trapped inside a coconut shell could have had the single-mindedness to miss it. Like most people, Jonah saw it like God and Noah, that the pairs just make sense. That's all there is to it. Humans have done it like this so long for a reason. You've got to have one other person in your life to share your life with, someone who knows you and loves you and hates you far more than everybody else. It's all about deep connection, is what Jonah said. And it's the deepest kind of connection you can have. And he's right, in a sense, I guess. But that certainly wasn't the idea with Noah. That was all about sex. He needed the animals to be able to have sex, and they survived purely because they could. Sometimes when you take all the cliches out of it, that's all that's left. Get in a pair. Have sex. Survive. And I know that that's reductive. I know that Noah's Ark is about so many different things other than the fact that the animals were in pairs. And I know that humans aren't animals. I know that it's different. I know it is, but it just feels that way sometimes. And when Jonah and I were getting serious, I couldn't get the idea out of my head. Was I still my own person when he was around? Or was it just me and Jonah? Now and forever. Or at least until we got bored of each other. And what if that never happened? What if we got off the ark and all of the other people were gone? And it was just the 2 of us. Facing eternity. Together. When I found him in the whale, I didn't want to be in there with him. And although that didn't feel significant at the time, I look back now and think that maybe it was when he ran off, I didn't chase after him. I didn't want to take it that far. Jonah was never as hysterical as me, and if I ever tried to tell him about how I felt, he just couldn't understand it. I can't blame him either. I mean, we were serious then, properly together. And he must have thought that if I didn't want to take it that far, I would have made it clear way earlier than I did. Sometimes I think you have to live a mistake in order to fully identify it as one. And if you live in fear of making them, then You never do anything. And I am thankful for Jonah, for loving him, for the fact that he loved me. I wouldn't change a single thing about him. I love that he went back after that plush whale. I don't know anybody else who would. He's one of a kind. So when he found me in bed with another man, it felt like all time had ground to a halt. He didn't say anything. He just walked into the room, looked me dead in the eye, and walked back out again. And that was it. We weren't a pair anymore. I called him the next day, not to say anything particularly, but just to let him say whatever he wanted to me, and he did. It's not worth repeating here because I'm sure you can imagine what he said to me, and I'm pretty sure he said exactly that. It was raw. And when it was over, I lay down on my bed and cried, and sometimes it feels like I never got back up. Later, I found out, completely by accident, that in the Bible there's actually some dispute about it. We know it is 2 by 2 because of the song, the hurrah, hurrah one. In the Bible, the 2 of every kind, it specifies that the 2 of every kind is actually only for unclean animals. The clean animals get to go in groups of 7. 7. That might have made the world a difference. But whatever the number, I'm still trying to think of where to leave Jonah, because I can't leave him in that bedroom staring back at me with those wide empty eyes. So I think I'll leave him in his whale. That's where he belongs. Full of passion and rebellion and carelessness and life. And when he finds his pair, the one that lasts, at least I'll know where to find them.